As I've said in the past, I am in love with the process of making video games. The coding, art, music, storytelling, everything. But since starting game development around 10 months ago, I've never actually made a full game. The only game I've worked on is Brainless, the 2D platformer you've been seeing in my videos, and the biggest problem I've had with it is the scope. And let me tell you about the scope. This game would take years to make, and having it be my first game is such a bad idea in a lot of ways. So to combat this issue, I decided to participate in a game jam. Specifically, the 2025 Shovel Jam, a game jam hosted by the content creator Inbound Shovel. A game jam is where you basically have to make an entire game in a specific time period, and this one was just in 10 days. In this video, I'm going to go over the entire process, from starting with a blank slate to ending with a completely finished game, taking you through my experience with the process, and hopefully this can help you get started on your own game, or just see what I've been up to. Also, for the artists, musicians, and even writers watching, I'm not leaving you guys out. Many game jams, including this one, allow teams, and trust me, there are a bunch of teams looking for writers, musicians, and artists to join. So if you want to put your hobby or interest to the test, and even meet some new people, I really think you should consider becoming a member of a team in a game jam. Now I know what you're thinking, being a member of a game jam team sounds super fun, but I wish I could just be a member of the Brainless YouTube channel.
Oh my goodness, me too!
I've recently opened up the Little Guy support team, so if you want to show some love, you can get your membership for the low price of $1.99 a month. You can get yourself some epic Little Guy emotes, super duper awesome loyalty badges, and I'll even put your cute little name at the end of a video. Aw, look at you. For real though, if you just want to support the channel a little bit, I'd really appreciate it. It's not required, I already appreciate you just watching the video, but if you want it to be super appreciated, I think that join button's been checking you out a little more than usual tonight. Anyways, joining a team. I think it's a great idea, especially if you want less of a workload or if you just want to focus on one skill. As for myself, I did the game jam completely alone. I know. But at least now I have 65 hours and 33 minutes of raw game making that I will go through all by myself to show you how a game is made in its entirety from start to end. The day was June 7th, 2025. I haven't even posted a YouTube video yet. I was working on my video backlog, so at this point I was probably finishing up my intro video. But aside from that, I'm on my bed, I open up YouTube, and I see this video from a channel that I've seen many times on my YouTube Shorts binges.
A game dev secret about the camera. A game dev secret about combo attacks. A game dev secret about resolution. Some player hits an attack. It's best give them a lot of...
The video was titled, I'm hosting a game jam with cash prizes. With cash prizes? Wait a minute, you said cash prizes? I watched the whole video and something just clicked in my brain. I hadn't really been making major progress on my game at the time, and I felt I needed a little game dev vacation so I could come back better than before. And it was only a 10-day game jam, so nothing crazy, right? So I marked my calendar for July 11th and waited for the big day. In the coming weeks, I was eager to start, fiending to see what the theme would be, telling everyone that I was actually gonna make a game, and only in 10 days. Hopes were high, and the day couldn't come sooner. Fast forward a month, July 11th, the day of the jam. I was ready. The Game Jam's theme was releasing at 5 p.m. and I was only planning to come up with the idea of the game on the first day. Nothing else. I wanted to take this jam slow and I wanted to make a game with an extremely small scope because we all know what a big scope does. But anyways, it gets to 5 p.m. and 6, then 7. Then 11:30 p.m. rolls around and I haven't started whatsoever. But why, you may ask? Well, with my incredible luck, this was one of the busiest weekends I would have in a while. Of course, right as the game jam starts, it all falls apart immediately. Long story short, I was taking 2 classes at the time and I was also working part-time. So I knew there would be some pushback there, but on the first day of the game jam, my project group for one of my classes puts an insane piece of work on me that ends up taking me 6 hours to complete. Also, when did we have the group meeting to talk about this? 4 p.m. So I'm sitting in that meeting, ready to leave and start my game, and I get this absolutely horrific news that I need to do some crazy task that I don't want to do right now on the first day of the game jam. Listen, I'm gonna be completely honest. I called one of my friends that night and I told them I wasn't gonna do it anymore. They were super excited that I was gonna be doing the jam, and telling them I quit on the first day was soul crushing, but I knew my week was gonna continue like this. I just wasn't gonna have the time. But no. The anxiety and self-doubt wasn't gonna get me this time. I've been looking forward to participate in this event for a month, and I was gonna give up now? My friends were looking forward to it, my mom was looking forward to it, and most importantly, myself was looking forward to it. I don't care if I just made the Godot logo jumping up and down. I needed to make something for this game jam. Anything. I tried to go to bed that night, and I just couldn't fall asleep. I knew the theme of the jam. Just get started. Just get started, huh? I lay in bed for hours, thinking of an idea for this game, tossing and turning when it finally comes to me. What if I make a game where you just press a start button and it resets you back to the start again, over and over, kind of like a time loop. And each time it resets, you have to do different puzzles to be able to press it again. Super simple. Even if I don't have a lot of time, I'll just make less puzzles. Having the option to make less game if I have less time would be a perfect idea, because I know my perfectionist self would not be able to publish an unfinished game. So with that idea, I go to sleep that night, still a little uncertain, and wait for the next day. The next day I wake up, and I immediately get to work. On the game? No, silly, on my schoolwork. But this was the plan for the game jam. I'll show all of my actual work on this calendar, but my plan was to do all of my work for the week as soon as possible so I could try and estimate how much time I would have to make the puzzles and features for the game. This way, I could manage my time a little bit better, since I knew there were still some things I needed to learn while making the game. So after a productive morning of work, it all began. I created a new Godot project, named it Just Press Start, hit create, and this is what I saw, a blank slate. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the game engine and coding section, and yes, I know, relax. If you're a code hater, please do me a favor and just watch the next minute and just let me know if you understand it. If you don't know any code, I just want to know if I'm making sense or if I'm glossing over important stuff. I really want to make this entertaining, but the main goal is for it to make sense. If you really hate these, you can skip the code chapters and just watch the narrative ones, or just look at the fun pictures on the screen. For the learners in the chat, how's it going? You might need to watch this one back a couple times. Anyways, back to it. We have our blank slate. I make a 2D scene because the game is 2D, and we're given a node 2D up here. So quick Godot lesson, the entire game engine runs on these nodes, where each node does different things. Every node acts kind of like a folder, so you can put stuff inside of them. The node 2D is the most basic, where you just put stuff inside of it and it doesn't really do anything special. But this specific node 2D folder is going to have the entire game running inside of it. This is called the root, because if we delete the root, the whole game will be unable to absorb nutrients from the earth and will die. Deleting the root is kind of like going on your computer and just deleting your whole hard drive. So we put everything inside the root, the player, the enemies, the background, and any other nodes we need for the game to function properly. Since this game was pretty simple, I didn't use a ton of nodes, so let's just introduce the main contenders here. First, we have the node 2D, which is the folder we know and love. Next is the sprite 2D, which is a sprite, or just like a picture. You can just drag in an image and there you have it, a sprite. We have the area 2D, which is basically an area that does stuff when things enter or exit it. Each area needs to have a shape, which is where the collision shape 2D comes in and acts as a shape or hitbox of the area 2D. And finally, we have the animation player, which will animate all of our sprites. There are a couple more that I'll explain when we get to them, but these are the big players in the project. Anyway, so we have our 2D scene, and before we start, I want to plan out how we're going to go from level to level in this game. Now let me teach you about a little thing called scene management. So this is what I'm thinking. I'm going to use a small garden plot as an analogy. The soil here is the main root of the game, the one we do not want to delete. And each plant I have is a scene. Each scene is a level in my game. And yes, each of them have their own roots, which we can delete. Whichever plant we put in the soil, we're going to see in our garden. So whatever scene we put in our main root, we'll see in our game. As we said, each level or plant has a root of its own. So if we delete the root, the whole level is gone. That means we could run a level and get rid of it whenever we want by just deleting the root. So here's the plan. Let's use level 1 and level 2 for example. We plant level 1 in the garden, and when we're done playing level 1 and want to transition to level 2, we fade the screen to black. At this point, we delete the root of level 1 and add in level 2. Then, level 2 starts up, ideally with a fade in animation, and we could play level 2 now. In the final game, I'm planning to have 8 different levels. So with 8 different scenes, we can swap them in and out as much as we want. This will keep the whole game nice and organized. Okay, back to the game for real this time. I'm gonna quickly speed through the things I usually do when starting a project, so you could start up yourself or just see the extremely entrancing game making process here. So I first make an assets and scenes folder for organization. We name the root so I don't accidentally delete it. We add a sprite 2D for the background so we can see what we're working with. I chose to make the game super pixelated, so the entire game is 192 by 108 pixels, which is 10 times smaller than 1080p. I make a placeholder for the background. I make a placeholder for the start button. I remake the placeholder for the start button. I added a camera node, which is just a camera. I set the project settings incorrectly. I set the project settings correctly. By the way, if you're working with pixel art and Godot and it looks absolutely deep fried, you just need to go to the texture and make sure the filter is set to nearest. If you don't want to do this for each sprite, there's an option in the project settings to change it for everything. After that, I finished off by adding some animation players that I ended up not even using at the end. I'll explain animation and keyframing another time, but you basically just change values over time, like opacity, rotation, position, anything. Anyways, class, we've hit a checkpoint. How are we all feeling? Come on, guys, we haven't even gotten to the coding yet. Alright, come on. Look, the coding in this game isn't really that complex, but it's super long. So I'm only gonna go over the main logic once so I don't kill you with boredom if you haven't died already. Since my game is basically a mouse cursor simulator, a lot of the main functions have to do with clicking on stuff. So the system I set up was this. Remember those area 2Ds and collision shapes from earlier? Well, they actually... What? You don't? Bro, go back. I'm not explaining that again. I said earlier that each node did something different, and one major difference that nodes have are their signals. These are basically custom functions that each node has, and they're super useful. A function, by the way, is basically code that's made for you, and you can just use it in one little line. So the area 2D has a bunch of useful functions, but we're here for 2. One tells you when the mouse goes inside of the area, and the other when it leaves. So what we do is make a script for the entire level, and when selecting the area 2D, you can just double click the signals on the right, and it just adds them in. So basically my setup went like this. We have a variable. His name is hovering. Meet hovering, everybody. Yep, I know. He can be false, or he can be true. He is false right now. If the mouse enters the start button's area, let's make hovering become true. true. If the mouse exits the area, let's make hovering become false. Now, in the same functions, let's make it so that the cursor becomes the finger when entering the area and back to the arrow when leaving it. Nice. Now all we need to do is check when the player clicks the mouse, and if hovering is true when clicking, it actually registers a start button click. Now, that's really it for the clicking logic in the game. The puzzles change it a bit, but this is the main mechanic that's used throughout the entire project. So after figuring out the mechanics of the game, we had this. It's so beautiful. That was basically a rough scene 1. The player starts the game, sees what's going on, presses start, and gets sent to scene 2, which I also started and finished on this day. And I just discovered that I didn't record it. What was I thinking? I can't be off camera grinding this early. Look guys, I apologize. I don't know what got into me, but in those 3 hours, I actually finished the entire game jam. I know it's like, it sucks, I couldn't record. Okay, actually, I finished the transition between levels where a little light pops up that expands when you hover over it. I also sketched a placeholder for the background and did the title. To make the title, I used the mini A sprite font and shaved the corners down a little bit and then just gave it a drop shadow. So I added all the new sprites in and this tragedy happened. So I didn't learn this until later, but if you're trying to be pixel perfect and your sprites aren't even numbers in height and width, they get placed on half pixels and the engine completely annihilates the sprites. So yeah, this took me a couple days to figure out. But after a little bit of tweaking, we now had this. It literally does the same thing as before, but it looks cooler, so it looks like it works better. Now day 3, I skipped making the mechanic for scene 2 and just went straight to scene 3. Now scene 3 was my first big scene. I'd say this game has 3 big scenes where the code gets a little bit wild with how much is going on, and this scene was one of them. Here was the plan. The scene opens like normal, but the start button seems a little different. It has some apparatus around it. When the player hovers over it, a weapon just jumps out from out of the frame and you can pick it up. When you pick it up, your mouse changes to a crosshair and these targets appear on the sides of the screen. You shoot the targets to light up the start button, and once it's lit, you triumphantly click the start button but accidentally shoot it and blow it up into pieces. You then put the pieces back together and find the hammer that's in the options menu that's there just for that one purpose and fix the start button. Wonderful. So I started by making the art so everything would look like it works better. I made the weapon a rigid body 2D, which is basically an item that's affected by physics. A function that rigid bodies have is apply impulse. Ooh, physics, I know. But I used it to make it so that when you hover over the start button for the first time, the weapon just jumps into frame. I'm gonna be honest, this was just a bunch of tweaking numbers and looking stuff up because I didn't really know how this worked. But yeah, my main goal here was for the jump to not be too strong and the weapon to land straight. Now, I know we're having so much fun right now, but I'd like to let you know this is only 3 hours into this game jam. So for my sanity, we're gonna pick up the pace real soon. I'm gonna skip going over the bug fixing, the tedious reuse of code for different buttons, and most of the code in general, since it starts to get super confusing when condensed into such a small video. So let's speed it up. Okay, so I made the targets move into frame with tweens, which basically change a value of something over time. It's basically a mini animation player that you can code. I made 5 different bullet hole sprites that randomly spawn and fade out when you shoot. I remade the hovering code so you could shoot the targets, light up the lights on the start button, and light up the start button itself. Absolutely pieced up the start button into 5 different rigid bodies, made a silhouette to put the pieces in their hitboxes inside, and froze each of the rigid bodies in place until the player shoots the start button, unfreezing and applying impulse on them. You still with me? Okay, I was feeling good at this point, I'm not gonna lie. I hadn't encountered any terrible bugs yet, and haven't really had to deal with any big problems. Anyways, day 4. Today I had a big problem. Whenever I grabbed a piece of the destroyed start button, it seemed to freeze in place or just break entirely. Now apparently you can't just go around changing the global position of rigid bodies because it like breaks the laws of physics or something. So dumb, I know. So I had to apply a constant force towards the mouse while you hold it, adding damping so it doesn't jitter like crazy. Yeah, this is the point where I realized my code was at the point of no return and I had no time to fix it. Day 5. Day 5 was actually incredible work-wise, if I'm gonna be honest. I realized that if I made 1 scene a day, I would finish my final scene really close to the end of the jam. And I still had to make the polished art, the music, and the sounds. So I knew I had to lock in at this point, and day 5 was the start of it. Also, by the way, remember when I said I had 65 hours of footage to go through? The first 4 days of the jam were just 9. 9! It was mostly because I was working overtime to finish all my work for the week, and I did. So you know what that means. Time to not go outside. So on day 5, I worked on my game for 6 hours, and got a pretty significant amount of stuff done. The first thing I did was finish scene 4 in record time. I think it only took like an hour. In this scene, I just wanted the player to click a small start button that would randomly change its position on the screen when clicked. This was all done in the dark to add a little challenge. Scene 5 was another big scene where I made the pop-up gag where it keeps asking you if you actually want to click the start button, eventually leading to a bunch of viruses popping up on the screen. I actually had a really great time making these viruses, and I think it looks super cool.
Oh, that... Oh my gosh, this is so sick.
But after closing all the viruses within the given time limit, you can move to the next scene. I also polished a bit this day. I added a timer to the dark section and made scene 2 have the same mechanic as scene 4 but without the darkness so the player can get used to the gameplay early. Day 5 ended with the start of scene 6 where I planned to have the start button move away from the mouse, and if you hid behind some clouds for long enough, the start button would go to sleep and become vulnerable for attack. Anyways, day 6, I worked for 9 hours, typical work day who, but this day actually started with a pleasant surprise.
Bro, okay. So at this exact point of recording, I'm about to hit 1,000 subscribers. Wait, bro, which is crazy, bro. I just posted like 2 videos. So what I'm gonna do is actually I'm gonna take a break right now before we do scene 7, and I'm gonna draw something to put up on the community tab because, bro, oh my gosh, the support is crazy, bro. Thank you guys so much. Like, actually.
So after making a lovely community post and grinding out on some code, scene 6 was mostly done. So I ended up leaving the polishing for later and moved on to the final level and most logical progression of numbers. Scene 8. If the other 2 big scenes were big, this one was enormous. I planned it out to be the grand finale, so I knew it would have a bunch of parts, but wow, I did not expect to surpass 1,000 lines of code in just one scene. I planned out the finale to be 5 different parts. First we had Simon Says, where you basically just click on some glyphs and have to copy the pattern shown on a little screen, and it eventually gets a little wild with the colors. Next is the return of our beloved weapon, where you trip an alarm when you pick it up and the game starts to glitch like crazy. The glitching, by the way, was actually a design choice that I changed super late in development. I originally just wanted a time loop sort of approach, where it would reset with no explanation, but after doing the pop-up scene, I realized that making it seem like the game was glitching out was a pretty fun idea, so I just ran with it. Also, by the way, I used a shader for this glitch effect. I found it on Godot shaders. A shader is basically code that runs on a texture, which just like makes it look cool. I don't really know. Anyways, the game starts going insane, and you have to shoot some glitchy targets, and your computer eventually gets overwhelmed and sent to a blue screen, where it says the PC will restart in 2,144 hours, which was my current sub count at the time. An X eventually pops up to close the blue screen, and we get a beautiful fade into our prize, the start button. As you keep clicking, it keeps releasing more and more light when eventually the game ends. Now, that entire sequence took me the last 3 days to make. The amount of bugs I had to deal with, issues with stuff breaking, and any other ordeals made this last couple of days extremely stressful. I was so locked in that I was completely silent for a majority of the recordings. I had to rush the creation of the music, which I ended up hating, had to learn how to add audio to video games, made sound effects through either synthesizing or literally grabbing a spoon and hitting my nightstand with it. Okay, I'm about to strike something with a spoon. That's pretty good, watch this. All while finishing the logic for the game, working on this lovely art, making the credits, making the startup screen, and doing any last minute fixes that wouldn't have my game absolutely explode when you run it. I honestly can't believe I was able to do all of this in just 3 days, and I honestly can't believe I had made a fully functional game in 9. After the 3 insanely stressful days of polishing and adding the final pieces of the game, I exported it. Well, actually, I had to figure out how to export it, and then I exported it, and finally uploaded it to the jam page. I'm not gonna lie, near the end of the game jam, my brain was definitely starting to deteriorate at a rapid rate. Looking at the quick stats here, I was working on the last day for almost 12 hours. Average work day who? These last 3 days were probably the most I've ever worked on something in my entire life, and meeting that deadline was one of the most stressful things I've had to deal with in a while, but it was worth it. I made a game. Just a few weeks ago, I had made a video talking about making games when you're bad at everything, having never made a game before. Remember when I said this?
The journey really is better than the destination. Don't get me wrong, the destination is probably amazing, but getting there will be really hard if you hate every step of the process.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I actually agree. I had an amazing time making this game, except for those last day bugs. I'll never recover from that. But the destination was amazing. It's just not worth the journey if you hate it. So here's my advice for my fellow game makers. If you really want to make a game, but you hate a specific part of it, or just want to hone in on one skill, it's probably best to find a team, or outsource. I know, I don't like socializing either, trust me. But if one of these is stopping you from completing your dream game and doing something you're really passionate about, why make yourself miserable by doing something you hate so much? Also, I really suggest doing a game jam. Finding a team is relatively easy since most jams have discords, there's a deadline so you have a little bit of pressure to finish, and you really learn a lot when doing one, even if you don't finish. But yeah, that's enough motivation for today. Go out and make games, don't let small setbacks keep you from following your passions, and for the love of everything, please have a small scope in your first games. Please, you have to believe me. I'm telling you, you need to start small. You'll regret all your life decisions if you make an enormous project first, and you don't want to go that route. Trust me, please. Just listen to me.
So a new YouTube feature just came out while I was editing this video. It's called Hype, and apparently it's for small creators like me to put me on like a leaderboard of hyped creators. It's completely free. I think it's somewhere near the like button. I'm not really sure. Might as well click that too, am I right? But if you want to show support without having to pay anything, feel free to click
click the like button and the hype button too. I don't know. Anyways, sorry that I skipped a lot of stuff in the video, especially near the end. This video was taking me so long to make that I just had to cut it down so I wouldn't get burnt out with the size of the project. I'm probably gonna slow production of videos down now since it's basically been a 9 to 5 making these for the past couple of months. I haven't even touched game development since the game jam, which is wild since it was like a month ago. Working on these videos really takes a lot out of my time, and I really haven't had time to do anything else in my leisure. Now don't worry, I'm not burnt out. I just have to find time to organize all my work, especially since I'm back in school now. In other news, I've got fan music, I guess you could call it. A remix of Riveting Chase and When You Knew This Was a Boss Fight but the Player Didn't have been made by these two amazing creators. I'll put the links in the description if you'd like to hear them. They're so sick. But anyways, I appreciate you watching until the end. Thank you so much for the support. Hopefully see you soon, and goodbye.